And I love that part where it says, in an office, this form. There's people that are truth, obviously. Important that not and when potentially absolutely, because at the end of the day, whether everyone's mind effective work the problem with teaching, and you may have administrator. That's the problem. Great teacher clear about that. As funny as leaders, salesmen, you heard that. You know, you should be a leader, not right. I think everyone's difference people will and you look behind you and promoted to here's where it's leader gets people to now will their behaviors. So a good leader is able to inspire was with the schools, and Steve knew. Now take note, this is a super that trip with Steve, I changed my mind and I said, I don't care how big Higher Ground gets, it's under him. There is no excuse not to be able to do that. A good if people aren't really following you, the sign one identity. They not enforce you need to take whereas a leader is equally important and off the cuff because a good leader, a good man is focused on people. I want to hear this. How much relationship you not equate work. That does not have not to do work. Focuses on getting the work done. They have subordinates. Whereas a leader has people informally following them. A manager has formal subordinates. They are transactional. A leader is about transformation. A manager, a good manager, is about X to Y. We have a trade. Here's what I need done. Here's what you have. Here's what I have. Let's get done. That's what a good manager is. They don't create the culture. They enact the culture. They act on that culture. There's a model culture and they enact it. They're not about taking risks. You don't want a manager who takes risks. I'm going to say that again. You don't want a manager who takes risks. You want a manager who looks at the risks and minimizes it. Because can you imagine, again, it goes back to my example, while in a group of 10, you cannot have 5 leaders, and they were in a fire. If 5 of them were leadership mentality, they would not check doors. All they would do is literally plow through, figure out a way to get everybody out. And we all know in a fire, that's not what you want. You just want one person like that. You want other people who will make sure everybody's in line, who will make sure everybody's touching doors before they plow through it, who will make sure certain things are done, who will minimize the risk. Think about it. If everyone was simply taking risks, would anything get done? Nothing would get done. Not efficiently. And finally, a good manager consistently looks at the details of day-to-day. See, why can't a leader focus on the details? Why is it that the behavior of a good leader is to not look at the details? Why is that? Why is that even a separation? What? You get bogged down?
It narrows the focus.
It narrows the focus. And what is the leader all about again? Change and vision. So if you have a leader looking at the details, is he enacting change at that point? Think about your life. Can you enact change if you're hyper-focused? No, you enact change when you are broadly looking at things. And my question to you is, why do we have an anti-manager culture? I've given you guys a good leader and a good manager. And a good manager, I hope you recognize, is extremely important. It's necessary. Whatever lie you want to tell yourself, it's a lie. You need good managers. Because, again, all these things, that is literally in direct opposite of a good leader. And I don't know about you, but I kind of like both. I want to have a good leader and a good manager. I want someone who can get stuff done and not just someone who's constantly telling me about the vision. I want someone who can spell out what needs to be done. I want someone who, while this person is shaping culture, is actually ensuring the culture is actually getting done. Right? So tell me then, how did this anti-manager culture came about? Why is there an anti-manager culture? Why else? Because it's the truth.
No one ever watches TED Talks about how to be.
A good manager, right? All the TED Talks, all the talks have always been about leadership. Everybody needs to be a leader. Leader, it's like positive thinking.
Schools too, I mean, that's what it was like sports. It's never like talking to anyone about like trying to be a manager. It's always
Yeah. In sports, the people constantly talk about leading your team, when you really listen to what coaches want, they don't want leaders in their team. They want managers in their team. Are managerial roles. But you are correct. It is emphasized in schools. Leaders. What else? Why else is there an anti-manager culture? There's
leaders that like, I don't know, spotlighted players, movies, and
spotlight, celebrity status. Leaders are always the celebrity. The funny thing is, good leaders, whenever they're interviewed, will always refer back to 2 or 3 managers. Read books about, like, biographies of good leaders, and they will name people that are basically playing the role of a manager to them. Best example are often leaders that have spouses, and they will tell you their spouse was their manager. That's like typical in almost every biography. A leader, their partner, their significant other is the manager role. There's a thing about Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook CEO. When he was interviewed, do you know who he attributed the success of Facebook to? Was his assistant. No, his executive assistant. He literally stated in several interviews, and this executive assistant is now the gurus of executive assistants, eventually basically stopped working for Facebook. Mark Zuckerberg let her kind of explore and be free. And now she runs a consulting firm and classes on how to be the most executive assistant. And basically what Mark said is without his assistant, he would have never had the productivity that he's had. Why? What role did his assistant play? Definitely not a leader. The details, the manager. His assistant enacted the culture. His assistant enacted the details. His assistant made sure that while Mark is so focused on the big picture, that his assistant is taking care of the details. See, people never ever highlight, and you're correct, in movies they never ever highlight the importance of a great manager. They only highlight the importance. We don't talk about the organizers. Martin Luther King rarely organized the events. He drove the vision, he created the great speeches, he drove the classes, but guess what? Without the people organizing the marches, the people who coordinated in the 60s to make sure this stuff happens, Martin Luther King would be useless. Because that's the point. You need good managers. You need good organizers. Why else is there an anti-manager culture? There's another very, very common reason why we have an anti-manager culture. And it's a word that you're all familiar with. Some people have fun with management, but that's true. For the most part, like I think it was Rio said, people don't like being managed. So it's not fun. And it has relationship with people don't like being managed and it's not fun. This word summarizes micromanagement. We have defined management as micromanagement. When in reality, I go back to the previous slide, the reality of it is, good managers are not micromanagers. Good managers have behaviors that don't need micromanagement. But because corporate America has looked at a very narrow definition of management, we have created an anti-management culture based on one concept, which is micromanaging. Now, if a team is effective, there is no need to micromanage. The reality of it is, alright, again, think difference of mentoring versus coaching. Alright, micromanagement is often a response to a lack of skill. Here's reality. Do we need to get micromanaged every once in a while? Let me tell you, yes. Whether you like it or not, when you don't know how to do something, you need to be watched, taught, and evaluated consistently until you learn. Think about coaching sports. When we're first teaching kids basketball, what are we really doing? We're micromanaging. We are going from student to student, watching how they dribble every movement. Their wrist, their placement, their timing, their stance. That's micromanaging, people. Why do we do that? Because there's a lack of skill. But once the skill, micromanagement, however, is never a good solution or style. So I want to be very clear. The problem is, micromanagement became the niche of managers. Regardless of whether people already developed the skills or not, they kept managing them, micromanaging them. It's kind of like helicopter parenting. Do you need to be a helicopter parent? Yes, at the beginning. Until your kid has the skills, sure. Watch them do it. But at some point, you have to let go and trust that they have the skills. The problem is, people never move past micromanagement. And micromanagement should only be used in environments where people lack skills and effectiveness and presents risk. That's the only time we should micromanage. Right? But like I said, most people stayed in micromanaging. But management in itself is not bad. It's necessary. Now let's really think a little bit more. Why else are we anti-managers? We name that people don't like being managed. We name that micromanagement, it's not fun. We name that leaders are often the ones highlighted, but not managers. A lot of people have bad experiences with managers. Why do people have bad experience with bad managers? Why do bad managers even exist? Huh? Because they're torn in two identities. That's one of them. They're trying to be leaders when their role is managers.
They don't have the skill to be able to manage properly.
Because nobody actually teaches the skill of management. Everybody teaches the skill of leadership, but nobody ever bothers to really tell you there is such a skill as management. The funny thing is, think about behaviors. What is one of our social emotional learning domain? Think of the 5 domains of social emotional learning. There's social skills, responsible decision making, social awareness, self-awareness, and self-management. Interestingly enough, we recognize that individually, we need management. But in companies, we're anti-managers.
I think leaders are someone who you share a vision with. So obviously you get attracted, you're almost brainwashed. But then managers are not necessarily have the same vision with you because you need managed. So obviously.
Yes. That is perfectly true because a leader has an advantage of being charismatic. As a leader, it's easy to be liked. Because think about it. Is anything in the leadership behaviors that I gave, is there anything there that says get work done? Not really. Everything about a leader is inspirational. Vision, being good with people, transformational. Everything about a leader is easily liked. Versus a manager, it's all about getting work done. And at the end of the day, we all like watching TED Talks, but we don't like getting out of the couch and actually doing what those TED Talks are telling us to do. That's just plain truth and reality. We all like to watch motivational things, but at the end of the day, when it really comes down to getting stuff done, we would rather just keep watching motivational things. And the moment we have an accountability system, we don't like it. Personally, think about it, even in your life. We have an aversion to accountability. And like Rio said, leaders are easy to follow because they're all about charisma and there's very little burden to them because they're telling you what you're doing and what you're not doing. And they're telling you to get stuff done. Why else are we anti-managers? Why else have the anti-manager culture surfaced?
We value like individualism way more than the unity of things.
We absolutely value individualism more than mission driving, more than a collective. That is absolutely correct. Now, I'm going to tell you, I come from a different culture. I love individual as terror. We were taught that you live whatever your parents lived, whatever you were told, whatever your family was, whatever your society dictated. And so, as a kid growing up, we had no opinions outside of the opinions given to us. That's reality from my culture. If you answered back your parents by the age of 13 or 14, you still got spanked and whacked and disowned. I mean, here we have 8-year-olds answering back their parents, giving their opinions. I mean, that's just reality, right? But here's also the problem with that. We value it too much. Too much. I believe that the perfect balance is both. You want individualism, but you also want community and collective mindset. When you are in an organization, you need somewhat of a collective mindset. We all need to be moving in the same direction. And the problem with a manager is that they're the ones making sure we're all moving in the same direction. And because we have such value in individualism, we don't like that. Think about how many movies are made in Hollywood about individualism. Almost every single movie is about individualism. Funny thing is, watch Japanese films. Very, very different. Japanese films are all about the hero being one with the community. One of the best movies I saw that is American that really embraced this is a movie called Kubo and the Two Strings. If you've never watched it and you'll get a better understanding of how a blend of individualism and collective mindset works. It's a Japanese film inspired by Japanese tradition made by Americans. It's called Kubo and the Two Strings. It's beautiful. It's a cartoon. It is beautiful. The beauty of it is the main hero is an individual. Kenji, yeah. It looks like Kenji when he had the man bun, yeah, when the top down, right? But it embraces collective community. At the end of the session, right, you have the hero, without giving too much of the story, become not like his parents. His parents were a samurai and the moon goddess, and he becomes a little bit something else. But then at the end of the movie, it also gives the grandpa, who was the villain, a redemption. And they redeem the grandpa, not by the grandpa becoming himself, but by the community embracing the grandpa and giving the grandpa what the community thinks about him, rather than what the grandpa is pursuing. I love the movie. Alright? But again, it embraces both individualism and collective. As an organization, we have to find the perfect balance between individuals, because here's the reality. The more we are allowed to put on our ideas, the more this organization will grow. But at the same time, the more we are allowed to put forth our individual ideas, the more distracted this organization will get. So you need both. Alright? Now, here's why managers are actually extremely important outside of everything else we talked about. Not everyone can and should decide. Democracy only works if everyone is informed. That's something that the Greeks understood about democracy, that we seem to be forgetting nowadays. Democracy only works if people are informed. Therefore, not everyone can and should decide. Right? Management is about making operational business decisions and taking ownership of them. Really ask yourself this question. Does everyone actually take ownership? Even at higher ground. Maybe even in this room, do you all actually take ownership? That's the point. Not everyone can give a solid yes on that. Not everyone who works here can give a solid yes to taking ownership. And that's to no fault of their own. Alright? Management is about protecting the inner wall from outside disruptive forces. Do you really trust everyone to protect the inner wall? I mean, again, let's be real and vulnerable. Can you really trust everyone to protect the inner wall? No. You are naive if you say yes to that. You know where most lawsuits come from? Inside. Most lawsuits do not come from outside the organization. Most of that outside disruptive forces were once on the inside. So sorry, we don't live in utopia. I wish we did. Then maybe we wouldn't need managers. But until we live in utopia, we absolutely need managers. Here's the other part. Think about your team right now. Can everyone in your team actually make logical decisions, minimizing risk? Some of you are laughing because you all absolutely know you can name some people that's just, they should never be in risk management. I don't trust me to minimize risk. I trust me to make logical decisions. But reality, if I'm in a team, I'm definitely not the person you should be going to about risk. I'm the last person to think about risk, both in my personal life and in an organization. But that's a problem. That's how, you know how a lot of companies die? Because most companies are started by leaders, entrepreneurs. They grow fast. But at a certain growth of an organization, what do you need? Managers, stability, risk management, people who can see the risk, people who will control the spending, people who will have a clear-cut focus on the day-to-day. Most entrepreneurs, they end up killing their own company. That study growth of companies and how they die, it's typically that. The second typical situation is they transition from a leader to a manager. So they force the leader to become a manager, and it becomes stagnant. See, you need both. You need a leader that's driving everything forward, but you need a manager who's putting on the brakes. Imagine a car that doesn't have brakes. Or imagine a car that doesn't have the gas pedal. What happens to that car? It either doesn't work, or the one without brakes, what happens to it? It crashes at high speed. Everyone dies, right? So you need good managers. Here's the other thing. Management shields their team to allow it to keep doing whatever they're good at and not get distracted or stopped. If you're a manager, that's your job. Your job is actually sometimes to shield your team from me. I'm going to say that again. Your job is actually sometimes to shield your team from me. Not shield you, but your team. It means that you will get stuff that I want to get done so that your team doesn't have to do it. Because your team is good at something and they should keep doing that. They should not be distracted and they should not be stopped. And sometimes without affecting your team. That is the job of a good manager. And it's very important. And now my question to you is, do you see all these things being done by all employees? Most of you have worked in other companies. Do you trust some of your peers to be managers? Probably not. And that's the deal about it. Saying we don't need managers is living in a perfect world. But we're not in a perfect world. We need good. I wholly believe that as a leader, I am only as good as that. What?
I said, who's a
So, not all employees and is capable. And even if they are capable, not all employees are willing to take ownership of doing more, but they don't want to do more. It may not even be this job, maybe another job, it may even be this job. You know people right now that you know are perfectly capable of doing management and leadership, but they don't want to. You can't force them into doing that. And even if, maybe it's not even a matter of willingness, they're not interested. Some people like doing what they do. And they're doing a really good job at it. They don't want to lead people. They don't want to manage people. They don't want to think about other people. They just want to come into work and put 130% of their effort on what they do best. God, we have teachers that are like that. They don't want to be a principal. They don't want to be an assistant principal. They love teaching. And it's not that they're not willing. They're 100% willing to do whatever it takes for the school. But they're not interested in any other position outside of teaching. Allow people to do that. You shouldn't force everybody. Just because they have the capacity and they're capable and they may be willing, you shouldn't force everybody to become a manager or a leader. Some people are perfectly happy and suited in what they're doing. And they have no interest in managing or leading. That does not make them bad. See, we have this idea in corporate America that people like that don't have ambition. Right? I mean, let's be real. That's what we're taught. People who down on custodians that have been custodians for 20 years. We look down at front office receptionists that have been front office receptionists for years. We look down on them. When in reality, have we ever considered? I have spoken to custodians that I have more respect for than managers. That are doing more impact in their school than their principal. This idea that those people are ambitionless, that's not true. We got to get out of that. Right? Not all employees are equally skilled in decision making and risk management. Think about this. As a manager, you have to make decisions that are good. It's just which decision avoids the most deaths. Not everyone is capable of doing that. Alright? And not all employees care about risk. I already mentioned that. And finally, not all employees are ready for the stress and weight. As managers, that is on you. Here's the reality. If as a director or as a manager, you're not stressed, you might want to reconsider why. You have to be carrying a load of stress, somewhat. Now, you may have good stress management and stress coping skills. Yes, 100% agree. But if you are not stressed, that means there's a little problem. Because you should be worried about deadlines. You should be worried about risk management. You should be worried about quality. You should be worried about if things are getting done on a day-to-day. You should be worried, here's the reality. You should be worried if someone is wasting the company resources. Because forever wasting your paycheck. You gotta be able to think like that. And not everyone can. And so see, here's the other problem that we usually don't realize, right? Why everyone is, and we talked about this already, right? Leading companies without managers, here's the assumption. You assume that everyone is highly skilled in all areas. You assume that everyone wants to work together. You also assume that everyone equally cares. Let's be real. This is one of the hardest things to learn as an entrepreneur. For the longest time, me and my wife got upset with people because they didn't give us much care as we did. Until somebody finally told us that we were full of crap. And here's what they told us. Why should you expect everyone to give as much crap as you do when this is not their work, their vision, or their creation? The reality of it is unfair for you to expect everyone to give as much crap as you do for something that you created and started. That woke me up. I'm like, oh. So here's the reality. Now, I wholly believe that there are some of you here that give as much crap as me and my wife does. And that's why this organization is magical and is able to do what it does. Wholly believe that. But I also wholly believe that some of you are here doesn't give us much crap. And that's not to say anything against you. It's just you have other priorities in your life. That is perfectly fine. So therefore, don't equally assume that everyone equally cares about what your department needs to get done. At the end of the day, even if you don't equally care, you are expected to get it done. So at the end of the day, here's the worst excuse for a manager. Is when a manager comes up to their director or a director comes up to their fellow director and they say, why didn't this get done? And the manager says, well, I thought so-and-so did it. Bullcrap, that is your fault now. Sorry for the strong message being driven. You unfortunately cannot say, my staff didn't do it. That is your fault for trusting that they care equally enough as you do. Seriously. That's just how it works. That is sincerely on you. You should never assume that they care as much as you do. Ever. Now, you can set up the environment so that they do, but at the end of the day, like I said, relationship does not equal work. You can totally set it up, but at the end of the day, if you're a director or a manager, coming up to your superior and telling them, oh, I told so-and-so to do it. So? You told so-and-so to do it, it didn't get done. Guess what? I don't really care. Because your job as a manager is not just to tell them to do it, is actually what? Make sure they're doing it. That is the sign of a good manager. Now, do you need to micromanage them to make sure they're doing it? No. There are ways to make them do it without having them feel terrible at it. But at the end of the day, it's still your job. So you cannot assume. And finally, these two parts. You have to assume that everyone is equally passionate and everyone is equally hardworking. Let's be real. Some people are lazy. Basic human behavior 101. Some people are lazy. Look at your peers. You probably still have peers that are completely happy with absolutely not doing anything. With playing video games at home all day and just doing whatever. Now, we're not saying that's a bad thing. We're saying in a workplace, that's not acceptable. And and to say that you don't need managers is to say that everyone's equally hardworking. That if I tell all 60 people at Higher Ground to do something, they're all actually going to do it with the same passion and the same quality of work. Are you willing to risk that assumption? Is everyone here willing to risk that assumption? No? Not even one of you is willing to risk that assumption? You shouldn't. Directors can be leaders and managers. It's always a duality. But right? So again, leading companies without managers is dangerous. Think about all these assumptions. Man. Now, at the beginning, when the organization is small, sure. At a startup level, sure, we can assume all these things. I 100% 6 years. But now, no way. I'm just being real. No way. I can't assume that anymore. I expect, now there's a difference between assumption and expectation. I expect this from everyone, but I don't assume it. Alright? So it's very, very important that we recognize this. Alright? So here's the last part before we go on a break. If you are a democratic decision-making manager, it's often unethical. Let me tell you why it actually becomes unethical. Like I said before, sometimes decisions are lesser of two evils. Why are you putting that on your staff? Seriously. Can you imagine? Hey, I'm just giving you a little bit of insight. Can you imagine if I put a democracy here every time our budget is low? Which funding and which program, which staff we should cut? Can you imagine the stress I'm putting on you every time that decision is being made? Audit issues. Can you imagine if I'm taking a vote from all of you during the budget process, which funds we should be willing to lose and which funds? It's not fair. Or let's put it this way, every once in a while you have to terminate an employee. Can you imagine putting that on everyone in your team who's about to get terminated? Huh? Lord of the Flies, we want democracy. And sometimes it's unethical. It is unethical for a manager to put heavy decisions on their people. I'm going to say that right now, that is unethical. Alright, it's stressful. It is a large responsibility. Why are you putting that off on someone else? You are a manager and a director because you are trusted to make large decisions. Not your staff, but you. You are trusted with those decisions. If you are constantly unable to make those decisions, you need to ask yourself why you're constantly asking everybody else instead of making those decisions. Because it's not fair to them. Like right now, Hans is not a manager or a director. It is not fair to Hans for him to be the one making decisions for Isa or for Rio. Because to Hans, he doesn't know the ins and outs of Higher Ground, and he is being asked to make decisions that he's not fully informed of. People shouldn't be asking him because Hans' real answer would be, well, I don't know. Exactly. Why are you asking me? If you ask Hans, which of this curriculum is better? Hans will probably look at
I'll
you.
tell you something.
He'll tell you something, right? But then, so see, that's good. But then now, if you ask Hans, hey, we have budgetary expenses and we need to cut something, and you ask Hans, you think it'd be better to cut tape or Star or Hollinger? What would you tell me? I have no idea, but I'm going to tell Hans, well, you need to make a vote.
But if he makes a decision, it's sometimes the worst is when it's white.
Exactly. Right? Thank God Hans is a good guy. Thank God. Right? Yeah, thank God Hans is a good guy. And he's actually being honest and telling me I don't know. But what if you don't get a Hans? What if you get, let's just pretend, and since you have that personality, an Andy? Alright? Which one should we cut? All of them! Or Hollinger, or whatever, right? Star. You have one person making a decision. Listen, you are putting a decision on a person who is either saying, I'm ill-equipped, or is telling you a decision ill-informed. Job and make the decision. Bear with the mistakes if it was the wrong decision. See, sometimes the reason we love democracy so much is we don't like the ownership of the failure.
It's a trust issue too.
And trust.
Like, if you ask me that question, I'm sitting there going, Sally is perfectly capable of making a decision, and she would make a much better, more educated decision than I would. If someone comes and asks me, what do you think about that? And I think they have a good job here. We're like, well, let's defer you to the actual correct person, because any of those two decisions could be the wrong decision, but she would be able to let the lesser impact because she's hands-on.
Because she handles it, that's the point. So you, as a manager or as a leader, should not always turn to democratic systems in making decisions to make it. And honestly, at the end of the day, don't be afraid to take ownership if it was the wrong decision. We're okay with mistakes. That's why we're okay with mistakes. The reason, too, why America has become anti-managers is because for the longest time, America has been anti-mistakes. And so people hated the job of being a manager. Because at the end of the day, you get blamed for everything. So then what did managers do? I'm going to make this as democratic as possible so that when the day my decision is wrong, I can tell my boss, it was the team's decision. Can't fire me because it was the team's. Yeah, but the entire team would get fired because it was my entire team who made the wrong decision. Can't be afraid to do that, right? Like I said here, it's often a lot of research, analysis, and hard realities. You are asking people to work harder than they should. Your job as a manager is to protect them and make sure they're doing the best they can at what they're good at. If you are having them make managerial decisions, you are not protecting them. You are causing your team to take on decisions that is distracting them from doing what they're good at. This is important that for managers to understand. When we're managing people, sometimes we just have to make the decision. You don't need to ask your people, you just have to do it. And it falls on you to explain to them and to reason with them why you made that decision. And it falls on you to bear the responsibility if that decision was good or a mistake. That is part of a good manager. Like I said, too many times we don't give enough credit to the hard realities of a good manager. A good manager saves the company. It absolutely does. You know what we're looking for right now in our strategic plan? Do you guys remember that junior executive? Those of you that have access to this, what am I really saying? I need a good manager. Because in all the analysis in our strategic plan, it says that we have a dynamic leader. I'm not a manager. I am a leader. Therefore, all our threats and weaknesses correspond. Our funding is not stable. Well, why? Because I'm a leader. I just pursue whatever the crap fund. We have it in the bank? Sure, let's do it. That's the reality of it. And I'm being forced to become a manager. Being forced. That's not what I'm good at, and that's not what I should be doing. I'm being forced to slow down. That's not what I'm good at. So part of our strategic plan, look for a good manager. That's what we're really saying. And see, we cannot be against managers. And you as a manager cannot be afraid of your job as a manager. You have to be 100% willing to. And when you're being managed, you cannot hate your manager. Your manager is ensuring you're successful. Your manager is ensuring job is getting done. Your manager is ensuring risk is minimized. Responsibility. Whether you're comfortable with it or not, that is the role you have put yourself into. So, before we go on break and go into effective management, questions, comments, harsh realities, things you don't like. Or go on break. Honest.
Mine's really more of a comment. What I'm internally struggling with is not necessarily democratic management, but I think I question my own authority to make decisions.
And thank you for being vulnerable and honest. And to your point, that is part of every manager's struggle in the beginning. And if you don't have that struggle, I'd be really worried. To be honest, Palestine as a manager, you assess risk. And so you are scared and you want to make sure risk is fine. So find a healthy balance. Don't lose that, but at the same time, find a healthy balance so that it's not crippling you as a manager, as a leader. Because at the end of the day, here's what you need to remember. We trust you. Leading that move, because we trust you know what you're doing better than I would be able to, better than probably anybody in this room would be able to in your area. So always remember that. Other comments? I ended with this before we go on break. Some of us have more inclination to leadership behaviors. Some of us have more inclination to management behaviors. Your true job is to understand both behaviors and know when to use it. When you understand that, you will become effective at both leading and managing. So, based on what I've said at the beginning of this, leadership is overrated. You know, we talk too much about leadership. Too much. Now, again, I'm not against everybody learning leadership qualities and skills. I believe everybody needs it. But at the end of the day, I consider first followers as managers. You know, they are your people who manage the movement. And he said it. They are equally important. Like I said at the beginning of this, when you really, because we always said, when you really talk to successful leaders and leaders that are not egotistical, you know, they're not in over their head too much, they will talk about their managers. Like, again, I go back to the example of Mark Zuckerberg, right? He credits the success of Facebook and the growth of Facebook on his executive assistant, his manager. So again, embrace your role as a manager. Embrace your managers. All right? It's natural for people to like the leader more than the manager. I'm going to give a very vulnerable, real example here. In Higher Ground, I'm the leader. My wife has always played the manager role. But here's reality. even if we weren't married, okay, this would not, we can literally, not that we're planning to do this, we can literally divorce and we would still need each other to run this organization. Because from a leadership standpoint, I am the leader. I'm definitely leaning towards risk, taking a lot of risk. I'm the guy that says, do this, do that. I'm the guy that's super fast-paced, and I'm the guy that can communicate the vision. If we were to switch roles, what would happen to Higher Ground? And if she were to lead and no manager and no me, what would happen to Higher Ground is stagnant. Because to her, she would like, let's stop this. Let's get this going. Let's make this good, and let's get it good, and that's about it. That's what would happen, right? But without her, let me tell you what would happen to Higher Ground. We would have been dead 3 to 5 years ago. Because without her, I would just keep going. I would ignore all the other details. I would trust, and here's the reality, because I am people-oriented, not task-oriented, I would trust everybody to just be doing their job. I would never check it. I would never look if it's actually getting done. I just trust they got done. And people could easily lie to me about how it's getting done. Without her, a lot of the things that are established in Higher Ground wouldn't have happened because I would have gone way faster than what's good for the organization. See, that is the role that we play. I have to, and here's what you guys need to understand, especially in your departments. You should have a healthy struggle between the person that's more of a leader and the person that's more of a manager. Because there should be constant conflict. Those of you who've worked long enough with me and my wife know that we have constant conflict. Why? Because as a leader, I'm all about taking risk. I'm all about, what's the problem? I don't see the problem. Let's do this. This just happened at the dinner table Thursday in front of some of our managers because we were arguing about the growth of community schools. And to her, she saw the risk, and immediately to her, we shouldn't do this.
No.
Well, let me explain this. In her mind, she wanted to protect, listen. She wanted to protect our community school directors. And she was like, this is a problem. We shouldn't do this at the rate that we're doing this because we are going to burn them out. We should have clear guidelines. X, Y, Z should be done. Whereas I'm like, that's just the nature of the work. They knew what they signed up for. This is community school. This is the way it is. This is the only way things will get done. And to her, it's like, no, that shouldn't be the only way things will get done. Because if that's the only way things will get done, we are going to crash and burn. That is a healthy struggle. Now, if you want to know what the conclusion is, obviously the conclusion of a good manager is always going to be fine. It's either two things. I will change the leader's mind, and I will change the leader's mind because I will make the leader realize why we need to not do this. Figure out a better way to manage everything that the leader requires from me to manage. And she's gonna, either one, they will change the leader's mind, which some of you have done that with me, or two, they will recognize that there is no changing the leader's mind because it's necessary, that they will figure out a way to reduce the risk and manage the resources and ask for the right resources to get the stuff that the leader wants done. A good leader, on the other hand, will also have two results. Number one, if you are a good leader, they will listen to the manager and potentially change their mind. Or number two, they will listen to their manager and support their manager in whatever is necessary to get what they want done. But that conflict is healthy. We cannot, like I said, and Andy pointed out why we became this anti-manager culture. Because what happened is this corporate America ladder climbing happened. And everybody figured if I became a manager, I may have to do less work. So everybody wanted to be a manager. Then they became a manager and they realized it's not doing less work. It's doing the same amount of work, but a different level of work. And then they overmanage, they micromanage, because they were afraid that if things didn't get done, they have 100 people trying to climb the ladder as well, and they're going to get replaced. And when they made a mistake, they got replaced by the person underneath them, who then realized, oh, that must be the way of the world. I better micromanage everyone under me, because if something doesn't happen, I'm going to get fired, and there's 100 people that I'm training to replace me. And that's why it became an anti-manager culture. But again, in reality, it shouldn't be. It should be this healthy balance of a manager and a leader working together. So now with that, good managers have leadership skills. They inspire and empower everyone while minimizing risk. If you are a good manager, you know how to reflect the vision of the main leader. You know how to speak and how to inspire it. You know how to basically empower people enough. You know people's strengths, that you know what parts you need to manage them on, and you know what parts you can let them go in. That's empowerment. That's why you know how to climb the pyramid. You know when you need to be a mentor and when you need to coach. That's why all managers should have coaching training. If you are a director or a manager, one of the courses that you should take at Higher Ground is anytime we have coaching training. Because that will help you understand how to empower people. You good managers can get people to do their job and be productive by using people skills rather than authority. Because here's the reality. It's easier to get work done when they love the people they're working for. So as a good manager has good people skills. Because if you're managing people just on tasks without relationship, for those of you that have been in leadership classes with me, you guys remember the pyramid of leadership? There's title leadership, but right after title leadership is relational leadership, then productive leadership. If you go straight to productive leadership and skip the relational, you will become why managers are hated. Because you're just all about tasks. They recognize strengths and are not threatened by them. This is so important. Because like I said, not everyone needs to be a manager. There are people that will do the job in your department better than you can. And you need to empower those people without necessarily convincing them to climb up the ladder. They don't need to become managers. You just need to empower them to do what they're doing. You can have them train other people. That doesn't make them a manager. This is what I said about teachers. We shouldn't convince good teachers to become administrators. We should convince them to stay good teachers. This is part of the reason why, I'm going to tell you right now, for the most part, as managers and as line staff, we don't have that much of a difference in salary. And we're trying to grow it so that everybody has almost the same salary as directors. Now, people will be like, that's terrible. Because in traditional corporate America, that's not the way it works. In traditional corporate America, I should be making 10% of our income. That means I'm making 6 figures. I'm not, and I'm not nowhere near it. I'm making way less than that. Why? Because I don't believe in that model. I believe that great technicians should be paid almost as much as great leaders and managers. Because they are doing what they need to be doing so that we can do what we're doing. So you need to recognize those trends and not be threatened by it. And a good manager enact the culture, because remember, you're not creating the culture, you're enacting it. You are forcing it. But you do it not by forcing it, but by being an example of it. You're an example of that culture. This is why I say the front desk, for example, should be the friendliest place. Why is that? Because you want to enact the culture. You don't want to force everybody else coming in here as a everybody should be friendly. Mr. Jansen said to be friendly. And we should all have you should be the example of it. And again, as a manager or director, if our culture is excellence, guess what? You should be the first one showing that. You don't want to enact culture by expecting people what you don't have. It's the same thing what I tell about kids. You do not expect kids to do things you're not willing to expect of yourself. Management is no different than parenting. Good managers understand that. And finally, this is the most important part. And listen to me when I say this. Good managers serve. They don't help, they serve. I'll say that again. They don't help, they serve. We're not in high school. The people in authority in the school, they use that power to help people and to advance their priorities. As a good manager, your job is to serve those above you, with you, and below you. And what does it mean to serve? It means you recognize you're not superior than them. Just because you have a leadership title does not make you above them. It just means your skills are better suited for that position. Or it may even mean, let's just be real, you may not even have the skills. The faith of the people above you was placed in you. So that means serve them. Serve. That means you're not doing this because you're expecting something in return. You're serving because here's the reality. When you serve people, people want to please you. I recognize that some of you are here for a paycheck, but I also recognize that most of you are here not because of a paycheck. Most of you are here because as one way or the other, my wife and I have personally served you in something personal in your life. And that's the reason why some of you are willing to not take certain opportunities in other places and stay here. But that would have never happened if we didn't serve first. You gain loyalties of people when you serve them. And guess what? It's easier to work with your boss when both you and your boss have a serving mentality. Because you recognize that whatever it is you do, put your personalities aside. Whatever it is you do, it is for one purpose and one purpose only. To advance the mission of the organization. And you serve that. A good leader serves. A good leader serves. You can read this in almost every leadership book there exists. A good leader serves. So a good manager knows how to serve. So recognize that. Great leaders need great managers. I've said this. I gave the example. But here's the other important part. Leaders need to be able to focus on the big picture. I'll be saying this right now to you. I need to not worry about whether we have the money to do crap or not. I need to not worry whether the TUSD and Sunnyside is happy with our services or not. I need to not worry whether we're meeting grant requirements or not. I need to not worry whether kids are dying here or not. That's serious. I shouldn't have to. And for a while, I had to be a manager as well because I lacked managers. Because as a leader, I need to be able to see everything there is to see. Into the future even. And I can't be bogged down by those details. So I need great managers. Leaders need to be able to take risks knowing that the day-to-day risks are being minimized by managers. One of my board members, Ken Heater, ran a very successful wealth finance firm in Seattle. It was during the time of the boom of Microsoft. He was the manager. His CEO was the leader. He wants my relationship with you all to be. It's the way he described it. He said his leader, his CEO, would go to all the clients and promise them the moon and the stars. And then would turn right around and tell him, oh, by the way, here's what I told them. I don't really know how to get it done, but I trust you can figure it out. He in turn would tell him, well, since you promised them that, here's what I need for you. Here's what I need from you, resource-wise. That is the effective relation. And they became, by the end of it, to show you how big, they were managing close to $1 billion of wealth. They started 2 of them. It grew to 50 employees, managing close to $1 billion of wealth. Because him and his business partner understood that. And it's like, you need to be able to go to the community and promise whatever the crap you want. In turn, you need to be able to turn back to your managers and directors and tell them, by the way, here's what I told them that we're going to do. And then they need to have the power and the comfortability and the trust to turn back to you and say, well, then here's what we need from you. And that's that. Because leaders need to think of growth, knowing that quality is taken care of. As a leader, I shouldn't think of quality. I should just assume there is quality because of you guys. That's reality. I shouldn't have to be the one worried about quality. I should be able to assume that when I go to the community, I'm promising them quality. Because I have an entire backing of people doing that. Leaders need people who can implement the vision while they focus on continually shaping the vision. I need to be able to rely on all of you, that you are actually doing the vision, so that I'm not going back and slowing down because something in the vision didn't get done the way it needed to get done. And then finally, leaders need to get balanced by managers. Most of you have done this with me. How many times have I said something that you just looked at me and said, Jansen, you're stupid and crazy and there's no way we can do that right now. Well, maybe not those exact words unless you're my wife. My wife uses those exact words sometimes. Not stupid and crazy? Really? Whatever. Alright? But that's reality. A good leader needs to be balanced. Because here's an insight. I'm always on cloud 9. Because I'm always high. Well, not like high. That didn't come out right. Right? So in reality, I don't always know the realities of the day-to-day. Because I'm always thinking utopia. That's where you all come in and balance the leader out. Now, I'm talking big picture, but in your departments, it's the same thing. Honestly, your directors, for the most part, should play the role of a leader, and the managers should play the role of the managers. And there should be that balance. Here's some important leadership behaviors, even if you're a manager. All right? You need to challenge the current way of doing things, searching for opportunities and taking risks. Now, I just said managers are all about minimizing risk. Yes. But every once in a while, as a manager, you need to be willing to do this. Alright? Now, if your role is more of that of a leadership, then you should be leaning more to this. You should create shared meaning. You should inspire shared vision. Foster collaboration. Recognize and celebrate accomplishments and small wins. Set an example so you act consistently and create trust. You should focus on the vision and embrace mistakes. These are leadership behaviors that managers can have. Even if you're not a leader and your role is more management, these are still important behaviors. Because as a manager, if you cannot see past risk, then you won't move forward. Now, you should always lean toward risk management, but at the end of the day, here's what will happen. If your leader says, we're doing this, and all you see is risk, and you're not able to challenge the current way of doing things, this is how we've always done things, and you don't have a growth mindset, then you are going to be the reason that department stagnates. So even as a manager, you need to be able to do this. These are behaviors that you need to be able to do. Now, here are important management behaviors that even leaders, even as a CEO, I need to have. You need to know risk management. You need to know goal setting. You need to behave in a way that plans work. You need to behave in a way that defines roles. You need to be able to organize resources, measure progress, develop supportive relationships, listen, encourage, and praising, and I need to be able to direct and facilitate progress. Even as a CEO, I need to have these behaviors. I shouldn't always have them, but I need to have them. Now, as managers, you should always have these behaviors. So here's the reality then. The trick is it's time to stop saying leaders versus managers. It's not leaders versus managers. Alright? Because management is about implementation. Management is about developing an organization to become high performers. It's about putting processes to support goals and ensuring tasks are accomplished well. Don't worry, I will give you this slide because I see some of you are getting frustrated that I'm going to the next slide right away. Yeah, Rob should have already shared this slide. Yeah, so don't worry if you're like, I can't catch up. All right. And then here's the final part. Management is about protecting the organization. You're here to protect the organization. And here's the real question. If it's really leaders versus managers, what good is a vision without high quality implementation and risk management? It's useless. A vision is only as good as the people implement it. So the real question, therefore, is it needs both. So you need to understand when you need to behave as a leader and when you need to behave as a manager. That's the reality, because leadership and management behaviors are equally important. So leaders need to both lead and manage. Or, here's the or, leaders can continue to lead knowing others are trusted with managing. Leaders don't need to manage if managers can manage themselves. Whichever one, it doesn't matter. Now for me, my ideal world is this. That's my ideal world. I would rather that we have leaders and directors that can do what they need to do because they know we have effective managers. But I recognize that leaders need to be both leaders and managers. And again, I'm not saying this should be us. I'm saying that's my personal take on it. You can have your own personal take on whichever one of this. Maybe you are the leader that says, I want to both lead and manage. That's fine. I want everybody in my team to both lead and manage. That's fine. But regardless, it's not a versus. It's not a leadership versus management. It's a leadership and management. It's an and. You need both to lead and manage. The real key is where are we as an organization? Are we as an organization more on the leading part or in the managing part? Let's be real. Let's ask that question right now. As an organization, where should we lean towards to right now? Where are we? Where should we be? Where are we? Let's start with the where. Let's start with the where are we? Where are we right now? We are in leading. That is correct. That's why our growth has been insane. But where should we be right now? We should be more leaning towards management right now. Why is that? Why are we saying that as an organization that we need more management than leadership right now? Danielle.
To create stability and be able to fine-tune and look at and evaluate what we've done to cause the growth, so that once we evaluate, we know how we continue to grow.
Create stability of some sort. We've been growing so much. Let's be real. Those that have been with me for the last 5 years, you have not experienced a year of stability. Every year has been a constant shuffle. Right? We can only sustain that for so long before you all say, Jansen, you're nuts. I'm done. That's real. So right now, we need to be more management. We need more management. Why else are we as an organization should lean towards more management? Art.
Well, it was close to that. At some point, there has to be a catch-up.
We're playing catch-up. It's not even at some point there has to be catch-up. We are now playing catch-up. Because before we can keep growing, we need to know how we even grew. How can we replicate that growth? What are the here's reality. Because we have been leading, we don't really know. Completely vulnerable, and you should know this. We don't really know how to grow this. We just knew we grew, and we knew it grew faster than everybody else, and we know we're growing effectively, but we don't know how to grow this. We don't know how to replicate the success. We don't. Until we stabilize and actually manage, we don't. We don't know what the risks are. We're barely running into some of those risks. What else? Why else are we saying as an organization we are in management right now?
Well, we already have a strategic plan, and we're currently working on an implementation plan, so we already did the leadership, now we need to.
Because the reality of it is, we have such a strong leadership foundation already. From a paperwork perspective, the strategic plan, but even beyond that, we have a strong leadership foundation. I'm not saying credit that to me. I'm saying we have a strong leadership foundation. That's how we're known in the community. We have a strong leadership foundation. We don't need any more leadership. What we need right now is good managers. That's what we need. We don't need people messing with the vision. I'm going to be real. This is not the time to ask people what they think of the vision. They're either in it or not. That's the reality of our organization right now. Because if we tweak our vision right now, we're not going to create stability.
Accountability, not only for directors to managers, but managers to directors. Jansen and I, as founder and co-founder, we need accountability of keeping us forward instead of all over the place. And then vice versa is making sure are our managers working, or is somebody just coming in, getting a paycheck and not getting anything done? So that accountability on both ends.
Well, think about this. Like I said, when an organization or a startup is at the beginning life of their startup, 5 to 10 people, it's okay to have everyone as leaders and risk takers. But when you have 30 people working, it's no longer okay to do that. You need systems of accountability. How do you know everybody's really working? You don't, until there's a system. Huh? Until there's a system, until you can watch it, until you have measurements. So yes, as an organization, we are at management. Now, in 3-5 years, would we shift back? Probably. We'll probably shift back to leadership, growth. It's a cycle. It's a cycle as an organization to know where you're at. The second real question is, when you're dealing with departments, when you're dealing with issues, you need to understand, is it a leadership or a management issue? If it's productivity, is that a leadership or a management issue? It could be both, actually. That's why you need to analyze whether, is it because my staff has low morale? That's why they're not productive? If that's the case, is that a management issue? No, that's a leadership issue. Or is it because my staff are just, they're just messing around and they have too much time in their heads? Is that a leadership or a management issue? Management issue. See, same issue, 2 different root causes, 2 different issues. And as leaders, as directors, as managers, that's your job. That's our job to figure out, is this a leadership issue or a management issue? And then finally, the real question too is, which behaviors do you need to learn? Some of you by nature, that's why we do the predictive index, are managers. By nature, you don't like risks. You love to analyze risk. You're careful. You might be a little more authoritative. Just get crap done. And you like looking at whether people are actually doing their job, and you like measuring it. Well, you're probably behaviors. Some of you might be leaning towards leadership behaviors. You love risk taking. You like relationships with people. And you like to make sure that there's constant vision and inspiration. You don't really care about whether people are actually getting stuff done as long as at the end of the day, everybody feels like they're a part of something. You're probably leaning towards leadership behavior. So which one do you gotta learn? Management. Now, some of you may be like, well, what if I'm a little bit of both? Well, great. Then you need to develop both, because you probably have a weakness in both. But either way, these are the real questions. It's not a question of leaders versus managers. It's really a question of where we are, what kind of issue it is, and what behaviors do you actually need to learn. So as we go, and as we're almost there, remember that great technicians are as important as managers and leaders. And as a manager, as a leader, you need to know that they can have leadership skills and lead without title. As an effective manager or leader, you foster great technicians, and you need them to stay as technicians. I go back to my teacher example. There's nothing wrong with a teacher that stayed a teacher. Too many times, here's what happens. And me and Andy were talking about this. Police officers. If you hear a policeman who's still on patrol after 20, 30 years being a cop, usually the question you ask is, why? What's wrong? What happened? Why aren't you getting promoted? Or you hear a salesperson who's been in the same company for 10, 15 years and still just a salesperson, oftentimes what do we really ask? Why aren't you getting promoted? That's wrong. That is the wrong mentality. We should be okay with that. Because if people are happy and good at it, we should reward them to stay happy and good at it. Your job as managers is not to get everybody to management. Your job as managers is to recognize who needs to be in management, who needs to be a technician, and who needs to be moved out. That's literally your job. Because some people, you don't want them climbing up management. You want them there, and they're happy there. Just like kids, if you're a good leader and a good manager, you're fostering social emotional learning. That's really what you're doing. And just like the same principles of fostering a classroom with social emotional learning, environment is everything. Whether you're a leader or manager, you come in not greeting people, you come in with a job right away, people will hate you eventually. It's just like the pyramid. You got to climb it. You got to get people to feel safe in your office, in your department. You got to get them to feel supported. You got to get them to feel like there is groups and they're allowed to interact with each other, that they're not pigeonholed. And then finally, you got to give them some sort of voice and choice. It's the same thing. The more people are bought in, the more people will be bought in, which is why you do not allow public whining. I'm going to tell you right now, just like classrooms. If you have a whiner in the group, you need to get rid of them. It's different with kids. I have more patience with kids. Kids, I will publicly correct. But in a workplace, honestly, here's reality. You have a gossiper, a whiner, you need to get rid of them. And here's why. They'll bring everyone down. And because our work is with kids, we don't have time for that. This ain't high school. I need you all to understand that. When you're running your place, you need to remind them, this ain't high school. I have no time, and we have no time as an organization for personal, agendas and vendettas. You're holding a grudge, get on with it. Either face the person you're holding a grudge with, handle it like an adult, do conflict resolution, or get somebody to mediate for you to do conflict resolution. You cannot walk into work thinking, oh, I hate my manager. I hate this person. I can't stand them. Because if you do, you can't work here. I'm 100% real. Here's the reason why. We're fostering social emotional learning with kids. Part of social emotional learning is conflict management. And if you're conflicted deep down inside and you don't know how to deal with that, it's going to ooze out to the kids. And that's why it's okay for you to correct mindsets publicly. You have a staff member that's whining, you can correct them publicly. It's perfectly fine. The grittier the group, the easier it is for everyone to be gritty, just like kids. All you need is one person in that group to say, oh, this is impossible. For the rest of the group, those of you that have managed teams outside of Higher Ground, you know the reality of this. You just need, especially with adults. With kids, it's a little easier. But with adults, you just need one Debbie Downer. Nobody wants to work. Hopefully you are not that person. If you are in this room and you are a manager and a director, I'm telling you right now, I'm hoping you are not that person. And if you are, you need some serious reflection. You need some serious reflection because that's the reality of it. You will bring your entire group down, especially since you are the manager. You are leading them. You are setting the pace. So remember that. It's the same thing. Just like with kids, you need to be able to effectively communicate. You need willpower. When people are talking to you, when your staff is talking to you, when your director is talking to you, when your peer is talking to you, turn off your laptop, get off your phone. I'm serious. That should be the culture of this place. Or at least warn them, hey, I'm really in the middle of something important, but I promise you I'm listening. I've done that with most of you. I either stop what I'm doing or I tell you, look man, you walked in the middle of what I'm doing and I really can't stop this, so I'm doing this while we're talking. But that's reality. You gotta have a lot of willpower. You gotta have some empathy. You want to manage people effectively, you can't tell me, I don't really care about your problem. That's why I have an open door policy. Alright? You cannot, again, as a manager, you can't be afraid, you cannot be afraid for people to go against you. Your ideas. Let them express it. At the end of the day, if it's a peer to subordinate, if it's a subordinate, sure you have the final say. I'm not saying you don't have the final say. I'm saying you should allow them to express it. It's okay to allow detractors to express themselves. Now, there is a difference between a detractor of an idea and a whiner. I'm going to be very clear. A detractor of an idea is somebody saying, here's why I don't think that will work. X, Y, Z. Huge difference. All right? Admit to not knowing. If you made a mistake as a manager, tell your team publicly. That's totally okay. We don't need this strong image of a manager. Oh, I'm a manager, I'm always right. No, that's false. You're not always right. You want your people to know you're not always right. Listen, it's a two-way conversation. And be genuinely interested with your people. Here's the reality. Just like kids know when you're really not listening, adults know when you're not listening. Ever talk to your manager? They're in another world? Hopefully, like I said, not here. And if it has happened here, I apologize. But you should genuinely be interested in the conversation. Finally, but you should have shared experience. You should be aware of the culture. And remember, just like with kids, how deep your relationship with that person is matters. The more relationship you have with a fellow peer, with a subordinate, with your director, chances are, if it's a healthy relationship, chances are the more effective your team will be. For the longest time, corporate managers and subordinates. What's that rule called? There's an actual name. Huh? Fraternizing. Yeah, there should be none of that. For the longest time. For the longest time. There are actually companies that tell you when you work for them that when you become a manager, you're no longer allowed to have lunch with subordinates. For the longest time, people bought into that. No family members, no none of that. But what they found is that in the most effective teams, it's not like that. The most effective teams are teams that are close, they're closely knit. This is even in the military. Special forces, they hang out. Sometimes special forces, they get divorced and their family is so dysfunctional because they have more time for their brothers and sisters in arms than they do their actual family. Because as a special force unit, they need to work extremely cohesively to the point that they know each other's strengths and weaknesses, biases, personalities, that they can account for all of those in a mission. So here's the reality. At Higher Ground, I'm going to tell you, you will be more effective with your people if you are doing things that build relationship with them.
Also, where we're at right now with Higher Ground, because we've never had managers, directors, senior director at Janssen. It's always been Janssen and everybody else. I think where we're at too is the trust is in both ways. So knowing and trusting me that I would never do anything that Janssen wouldn't want, and me trusting my directors, knowing that they would never do anything to harm the company, and then the directors knowing that our managers would never do anything wrong for the company. And that's where we're at right now, is that sense of trust, that sense of, oh my gosh, I'm so used to going to Janssen, Janssen's so used to going to us, you know. So just remember that communication is going to be key. And one of the things I said to the directors this last meeting was, I want to earn your trust. Because I've been a director. That's, you know, I've been alongside of you, and now I want to earn our directors' trust. And so directors earn your manager's trust as well, because we've never had that either. So just remember that trust issue. If we change something on the dime and you don't like change, trust the process. Because if it comes from Janssen, he gets off the phone with Senator Radley, who's our president, says, I want this change because of A, B, and C, it's going to hurt the company. Janssen's going to move on it. And sometimes we won't have time to stop, explain it, have a meeting, make sure all the feelings are good. Sometimes we're just going to be like, Andres, we got to change this now. I'll let you know later. You know, so just trust the process in this time of change that we're doing as well.
And hence, going back to relationship. If you want that trust, earn that trust, gain that trust. And it's mutual. It's always going to be mutual. There's other slides in there, but I feel like you really don't need to hear it because it's social emotional learning behaviors that I included in there. If you still need to hear that, that means you haven't been paying attention. Right? There's the pyramid in there, and then there's the, you know, grit and growth mindset, build community. It's okay to make them do things. As managers, it's okay to make your staff do things, right? Again, if you need a reminder of that, maybe you haven't been paying too much attention. But it is in the slide. What I do want to do today is I want to role play, and I want to play some scenarios. And what we're going to do is, because this is managers and directors, I want to divide us into two groups. That way everybody can kind of have their own group, and we discuss this in a smaller setting. We actually have two directors on each side of the table, so that works. So we'll divide exactly here. Boom. So Brandon, onwards, you are one group. Keenan, onwards, one. There we go. Join your group. Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I need one of you. Maybe I'll actually ask Andres to move to the stage. Yeah, this Andres. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, 3 directors and 3. Right, yeah. I forgot. Alright. Yeah, I forgot. I actually I was looking at Art and Sally. I'm like, yeah, that's right. Remus the director. Yeah, I forgot he's the director. Sorry, man.
What are the scenarios?
Alright, so here's the scenario. And there are 3 scenarios, so listen. and I need you to solve all three scenarios, what would you do? Solve. Alright? So, you asked a co-worker, a peer, this is a peer, very important, to drop off a package at the post office after work on Tuesday. Okay? It's not too far out the way home for them to do so, and you live a lot farther away. It's important that this package be shipped to its destination, because the destination is to the main office in Arizona, the BES main office in Arizona, and it is a proposal for a contract with Higher Ground. That proposal is going to be discussed at a meeting with international business partners who are in town only for Wednesday. So it needed to be there that day, and it needed to be there that Wednesday. And you find out Wednesday afternoon that the package never arrived. Alright? So you find out that it never arrived. And this was a proposal for your department. Alright? What are you going to do? That's scenario number one. Everybody clear with scenario number one? Alright. Scenario number two. You arrive to Higher Ground and you're kind of in a not very good mood because whatever. And your manager, this time someone above you, reminds you that you are responsible for doing something that hasn't yet been done. Something that needs to be done and it hasn't been done yet. And the problem is, you only have till about noontime before this actually needs to get to the CEO. So whatever needs to be done, your manager needs to be in front of the CEO by noontime, and you haven't gotten it done. And so you are now in this conundrum, and the reason it hasn't been done is because you have two other people that you are waiting on for their pieces in this project. Alright? So what do you tell your manager, and what do you do? You have 2 hours before noon. Everybody clear about it? It's you and two other people that you're waiting.
And you have your manager? You're a manager?
No, your manager. Totally.
So you have staff?
You are the staff. But you are somewhat responsible. You are a director, or you are the direct supervisor of this person. So you could be a manager, a direct supervisor. And your co-worker has been repeatedly sexually harassing. Alright?
Sexually harassing you?
You. Okay? So, you meet with your director, okay, with the person right on top of you, alright? So, over you, alright? Sexual harassment, yeah. And during the meeting, your director, your direct supervisor, the person directly over you, alright? You notice that she didn't take any notes, and she was constantly on her phone. You also notice that even
So you met with this person to tell them about the sexual
harassment of, yeah,
Okay.
yes, and this is what's happening. What should you do? 3 scenarios. If you notice, there are all scenarios that have some management required in them, some leadership required in them. So there you go. You're solving all 3. You have exactly, I'm only giving you 7 minutes to solve all 3. You may wonder why, but again, in a leadership and management situation, sometimes you don't have a whole lot of time to think and discuss, and you gotta make decisions off the cuff. Alright? Go! 5 minutes.
Go and then we come back. Yeah.
So number one is the peer dropped off the package for you, and it was supposed to be done for an international.
What was on the board?
And it never got. Two is gonna arrive after you're going at a.
Oh, candy growing up.
Then it reminds you that you haven't done. And, yes, and you only have till you to get it done, but you're waiting for two people
Maybe it's the last
to
time.
get it done. And
You have 3 minutes left. No, it's not. 5 minutes is all you got. You have 3 minutes left.
For the second scenario,
The second scenario. Which one is the second one?
where you have a deadline because you got to wait for two people.
Good question. They're actually sound. You did something that people should be doing.
Your manager has to present it.
you're presenting. That's number one.
You just have to make sure you're
So
done.
you're not presenting.
Yeah, you're not.
For your manager.
It's for your department. You're actually the manager.
Oh, you're the manager.
Oh, you are the manager?
But you're not presenting it.
You're not presenting. It's just it's the one that the package needed to get out.
Okay.
Just make it sure.
What they do or don't, what you have to do.
Last minute.